Hey, friends and fellow viewers, welcome to yet another episode of Coffee Conversation, the emerging lawyer, powered by the Emerging India Forum TIF, Lions Club of Mumbai Shining, India Business Group IBG, Indian Chamber of International Business ICIB, and Prime Infotech Solution. The theme for today's conversation is 12 do's and don'ts for a successful corporate lawyer. I, Jolly Singh, will be co hosting today's conversation with our favorite host, Mr. Mansoor Thakral. For our today's coffee conversation, we have today with us Priyanka Sinha. Advocate Priyanka Sinha is a co founding partner at ANP Partners and alumnus of ILS Law College, Pune. She has assisted several MNCs, Indian corporates, high net worth individuals, family businesses, including many business leaders, celebrities, and private individuals. She takes deep interest in catering to clientele in the construction and engineering sector, MSMEs, startups, media and entertainment sector, and family businesses. She has represented clients in litigation and dispute resolution and concluded several commercial deals. We welcome you, ma'am. So,
Thank you.
our format is that we first cover the professional journey and then we come to the personal journey and wrap up this whole conversation with a fun rapid fire round. So let's get started with our today's conversation. Over to you, Mansoor.
Well, thank you, Jolly. All right, Priyanka, we're gladly happy to have you on this conversations. And surely, as a lawyer and our audiences who are going to watch you are really going to be thrilled for hearing your answers and as you share your experiences with everyone. So I would like to kickstart the first question. Okay. So we all know as lawyers have to become, before becoming a lawyer, you have to go and intern in different internships and different firms and, different law firms. So can you please tell us something about your first internship, which you had done at Chadda & Co. How was the experience?
So yeah, to start with, I would say the experiences was really good. Considering back in the day, Chadda was a boutique firm and they were doing something which was more on foreign investment. That was primarily the practice area that they were developing. And it was very different from many other firms that I'd interned at that point in time, or I wanted to intern, in fact. So it was a great experience because the kind of work, it was a boutique practice niche area that we were working on, and a very small size team where you get recognized and you get the right work. A lot of research that I got to do during that period. And it was in a different territory. Being in Delhi, the every place has a different way of functioning. I mean, how law firms function in Delhi is different from how it functions from Bombay. So yeah, that's another experience that you get while you're in college. And I think all of this makes us where we are today.
Over the years, like now, since your time, since you have been an intern, and now we have other interns who are interning.
Correct.
Overall, how is the legal industry when it comes to interns evolved for the interns which are currently doing internships, according to you?
So how I see it is, earlier they were not as mandated internships. Now colleges have made it mandatory, where most of the interns and most colleges come up with a format which is after the internship, we need to fill it up as to what work specifically they've done, how they've performed each of these tasks. We didn't have such structured formats back in the day. And now I see a lot of long-term internships coming. So while we probably were in college, it was more of an internship for a month or at the most 2 months. But now I see a lot of students preferring a longer term, and which I think is a great thing because you actually understand how the firm functions, or you get more holding of the work that you suppose you're working on a particular matter. Your understanding gets way more than if you intern for just a month. So yes, I think that's been a development, and there's been a lot of paralegal, especially in Bombay. We see that a lot of people opt for being a paralegal because they know if in their 4th or 5th year they are a paralegal, the chances of being absorbed and getting a PPO is way higher. So I think a lot of people, and that quite happens even in our firm. So that's one development which I would say.
Okay. So as you had mentioned that you have done a lot of internships with many firms. So how has the experience been as, like an intern working in different firms? If you could just share a little bit about the professional side of an intern.
Correct. So I think it's very important to intern, if you ask me. there is a part of it that we definitely, that is what we study in college. That's the part of the curriculum. But legal profession is more of what you really see in practice, whether you, whichever form of law that you take. And, very often people say that I want to do IP law. So I keep asking, I said, how do you know that you want to do IP? They say, oh, we've done one internship and I've figured that this is the area of practice that interests me. So I feel the kind of, so there's gaming law, there's sports law, there's media entertainment law, there's construction law. A lot of it is not really taught in colleges. This doesn't form part of your curriculum. So only when you intern, you probably get exposed to, if the firm has such a practice area. So it's important, is how I see it. And rather than interning at one place, it's important to, that's the only time you probably get to explore. Be in different parts of the country, you understand the area, the language, the way people function. And that you probably don't get eventually after 5 years once you pass out, right? You can't be switching cities and moving for jobs. So I think that's a great time one can actually explore in their 5 years to understand where their interest lies.
All right. Would you like to share any kind of incident that must have happened to you and like change your perspective? Like internship is not like all that easy or bed of roses. Any kind of incident that must have taken place with you?
Not really. I've had some really great mentors during my internship days, where in fact I was told, what really matters, and this is back in the day, probably one of my first internships, where I was told reputation really matters in the field. So 5 years senior or 5 years junior, when you look at somebody and you feel, oh, this person's 5 years junior to me, tomorrow that guy could eventually end up being a GC of a company. So reputation really matters, and your desire to learn is very important. So yeah, I think once you have that in place, because ultimately all of us are learning till the last breath in this profession, and everything's changing as each day passes by. But nothing particularly where I've had in an internship which has not been something which, not a great incident. I don't think I've really had some incident like that.
All right. Okay. So when did you start ANP Partners, the law firm, and what were the challenges?
We started in 2016. Yeah.
Okay. And what were the challenges you faced? If you could just share a little bit about the story from the start.
So the two of us, so Ankita and I, when we started this, we've been friends. We were in college together. We were alumnus. We met in ILS. So we were roommates. We've worked together, and we eventually decided to start the firm. But when you start the firm in a place which is Bombay, which wasn't either of our hometown, because she's from Assam, I'm from Calcutta. And for us to take the plunge of starting a firm where you don't have your client base, in that sense, you've not really you don't belong to the city. So it takes time, I feel, to understand how the territory works, how your clientele, the kind of practice area that you would want to, or in fact for the when you start a firm, how much even to bill a client. So it's important to, if you're starting a partnership, that is, it's important to, ultimately it's having that faith in the other person and driving it. And that's the driving force. And that's how I see it. But definitely there are a lot of challenges. It's never a rising curve always. You really need to understand what you're entering into and having that faith that, okay, fine, we have to pull this together. So I think that's how it works.
Okay. So when you all were now when anyone starts a company or starts a law firm, I think they always come up with the name. So I see it's like ANP Partners. So that's how did this come into existence like?
So it's more of, it's actually the initials that adds up to this name. And it's completely like, when we talk about the firm today, it's the two of us starting and the journey together of ANP, which it's Ankita and Priyanka, and we wanted to have our names and initials in the law firm and not have any other name, because that's what we resonate to. It's ultimately, it's ANP. So yeah, it was easier for us to probably name it because we believed in that. And I think that's important. In a lot of places where you find where people are given a designated position as a partner, where ultimately it's whether do you resonate to the brand that you've created. Holding a position is one thing, but connecting to the brand that you've created is very important in our field, because ultimately it's not just the growth of the name, it's a brand that you grow. So I think that's an important aspect, which we've probably figured and we're figuring more as each day passes by.
Like when I read the name ANP, it reminds you of HP, Hewlett Patrick. I think they had tossed the coin and you're like, it'll be HP if it comes to Hewlett, and then it'll be Patrick. And then they eventually.
I can't think of anything else. I mean, somebody recently said, oh, it should be Ankita and Priyanka law offices. I said, I don't think so. But yeah, I mean, it's just the initials and that's about it. So I think we were very clear probably at day zero. We weren't sure of a lot of things and we're still figuring there. But yeah, I think the name is something which we came up very quickly about.
Definitely, that's and it stands out also. Like you have the initials like ANP Partners, and when you read it, are like, okay, these are some people. These are the ones forced to be reckoned with.
Probably that's work, maybe.
Definitely. Okay, moving on to the next question. What are the growth opportunities you see in the legal industry in 2023?
I see a lot of movement in that sense of the kind of laws that are coming up and shaping. So there's data law, there's, these days the kind of, there's so much that's happening. I mean, you have the labor and employment laws shaping up. There's IBC is constantly, insolvency, bankruptcy is constantly evolving. I think these days, lawyers are really open to take up any of these niche areas and develop themselves. And there is a lot of opportunity in each of these niche areas. So yeah, there is a lot of scope, if I have to say.
Okay. So
like there's gaming law, there's sports law. It's just coming up, right? So there is so much, and it's still a lot of it. There's no probably like you have something about the drones, you have something about AIF. I mean, for all this while, I mean, laws are practically in that sense shaping up. There's REIT. There's so much that's coming up. So yes, definitely, I think today, and then startups, the kind of field that's coming up, the kind of work that's there, whether you work with a VC or an angel fund, you're working with a startup, understanding the business has changed because it's not just the core business. And I think that's a challenge that in today's time and age for every lawyer to understand what is the business, because you're not just advising what the law is. It's not just like incorporating the company or advising on a particular document. Unless and until you understand what the business is, it's very difficult to deliver. But once you understand, it's a great positive thing for you. It stands with you. So yeah.
A lot of things coming in the near future for the legal industry.
Definitely, a lot. Even for us, and I think the only thing probably it's an advice I see. It's something that I tell my team, or in fact I tell myself, is all of us really need to be agile. You can't be just because you've done litigation, and when you have a new court coming up in 2016, which was IBC, a lot of people for once said, we don't know how to do this. And it's more like you have to constantly keep yourself open to, or whether it was startup. So I think that's one thing where we had a great advantage, because as a young law firm or a young team of members, where we could take the plunge of understanding new subjects. Like, we were in fact, my partner's been involved in drawing up the data bill. So it helps. I mean, these are new areas of law. If you grasp your understanding in these subject matters way before the others have, it's easier for you to understand the perspective.
Right. Okay. So moving on to the next question. Okay. So you're a legal expert in the corporate and commercial law. So what do you think are the most important considerations for companies when it comes to legal compliances?
So for a company, one thing which is very important, which in fact I keep advising, and particularly in bigger groups, this happens, where I would talk about where a lot of agreements are entered into, and it's a part of their internal documentation, and they've been using it for like 5 years, 10 years without making any amendments, which I think at least after a gap of 2 years, 4 years, one needs to revisit the document and make necessary changes, because law is changing. Like, I'll give you one example of how the arbitration law has developed ever since like 2017, 2018. There have been some series of judgments, Supreme Court, Bombay High Court, all across Pan India. And there's a lot of, which in fact makes the arbitration, particularly if one party is trying to appoint an arbitrator unilaterally, you cannot do that. So, but people are still using such contracts. So where, like there are a lot of things one needs to revisit with the changing times. Like there's labor laws changing, like even for your employment contracts. One continues to use it. They're like, okay, we've made it. We have these documents in place. So it's important to revisit agreements. It's important to revisit your licenses, your registrations. A lot of big companies, or in that sense, the companies do have it. I mean, they have these checks where they're constantly ensuring that these compliances are done, but they don't do it for agreements. They're doing it for a lot of their licenses, registrations, registers, and other things. So that's important. And for, I think, medium or smaller entities, it often something which I see and advise. Um, they get a registration, but the clueless what needs to be done subsequent to that. So one needs to, because it's like they go to a CA, they get the registration done. And particularly if I have to talk about the territory of Bombay or other places where there are some households where there are like 3 to 4 MSMEs in one household. So you've just got the registration, that, okay, fine, once I'm availing the loan, I get the benefits. But what do you need to do? And that's another sphere. There is so much work. There is so much disputes, facilitation, in that sense, conciliation happening, matters get referred. That's an important subject because the law has been in place, but the awareness has not been there much, where people do not know how to make use of it. So these are important things, is what I think, for a corporate.
All right. What would be your few tips you would like to give the audience if someone is trying to become a successful corporate lawyer?
I think the only advice I will give it to anybody, which thankfully I was told, or in that sense, I grasped it at a very, in my initial years of practice, is if you're on a contract, if you're working on a documentation or an arbitration, which involves a corporate or a commercial aspect, it is important to understand the business a lot more, because one could pick up a book and understand the law, but it's important to give that patient hearing and listen what the client has to say. A lot of times, usually lawyers get a little dragged about not understanding, and they feel, as long as I know the law, I know all of it. But that's the cue one must take. And all of this eventually really helps you. The understanding the technical, financial, and the commercial aspect is the most important thing. So even while you are closing the transaction, it helps you. Even if the matter eventually goes into a dispute, that's where it's going to lead you to. So patient listening of that aspect is very important. Otherwise, one can't be a great commercial lawyer, because eventually what one looks for is a solution. When one comes up to a commercial lawyer, they say, give me a solution. They don't ask you, okay, tell me what this provision is. Because trust me, these days, even clients know how to check up on the law. And when they come to you as a lawyer, they've already done their homework, they've done their research, and then they reach out to you. So ultimately, what they want is a solution. So it's very important to understand the business.
Right. Okay. So moving on to the next question. Okay. So nowadays we see that a lot of like businesses are growing on a very higher scale, and like there's a massive profits coming in and everything keep going. How does one company always keep operating with legal boundaries? Because we know that the legal laws and everything keep changing.
Correct.
So how do businesses always keep operating in legal boundaries? Is there any kind of a solution to that, or how they keep themselves updated, if I may ask it?
So a lot of companies have, in that sense, obviously now invested in having an in-house legal team, and I believe most of these teams function quite efficiently in updating the businesses as to what needs to be done. So that's one aspect. For a relatively smaller corporates where they probably don't have a big legal team, it's important to be in touch with your lawyers, understand, and not just reach out to them at a stage of firefighting. That's how I see it. Because for a very long time, people have always thought of reaching out to a lawyer only at a firefighting. So that's changing. In fact, even from a startup to a big corporate MNC, everybody wants to take an advisory or an opinion. So strategic advisory is playing a huge role in today's time. So that's something which I think corporates should indulge. Taking an external advice, if it's understanding what the risk analysis is, even if it's a tender documentation that they want to bid, have somebody who can red flag your clauses, and then understand whether you want to go for it or not. I think that's something, that's an advisory which it's important to take it from a lawyer or a law firm who's experienced in doing that.
All right. Okay. Moving on to the next question. Okay. So, in the lights of COVID-19 pandemic, which hit us all, what were the most significant legal challenges like every law person or any business and individuals in your areas were like forced to change something, or how they were practicing?
I don't think lawyers were very tech friendly prior to COVID in that sense, barring the usage of technology was very minimal. And they've been averse, but there's been a massive shift. None of us ever thought that hearings would be on VC. There would be e-briefs. Now, nobody even wants a physical brief. That's a great change, if you ask me. But initially, there was a little bit of resistance, understanding. But I think everyone's using and is reaping the benefit of it now. Because it's more like, you finish one meeting on a VC and you can quickly jump onto another hearing if that's reaching, or you can, so multitasking or being at two different places, it's easier because of, this whole hybrid model. So I think that's been a great help. But still, there's a lot to go. We're still getting accustomed to it. Despite a lot of measures that have come up, I would say a lot of it hasn't been as effective yet. Like it just happens where, you're trying to upload a document, and, the drop down menu only allows you to put a name of an Indian party and choose the country as India. What if one party is a foreign based company? So, and, then we've actually moved to the department to say that, I'm not able to do the e-filing. So I think it's at a nascent stage, it's developing, but it's a great initiative. And,
Okay.
I see this to be the future, and it is going to come up.
So, like, how have you adapted your practices in those days to the response to those challenges?
It's definitely not been a very swift move, but that way we've been it's been a young team. So, like I said, more agile in that sense of adopting it was way quicker. So yes, we've all worked as a team to figure this out, and still figuring.
All right. So, with increasing importance of environmental sustainability, how do you see the legal landscape evolving in response to these concerns?
So I think compliance, understanding, and all of this, understanding of the businesses, people seeking a legal advice. Like I said, not at a stage where it is, at a firefighting stage, and people are seeking out advisory way before they start. So they like today, if I've decided to even incorporate a company, I would like to take an advice even when I've just, there's been an inception of an idea. So that at an ideation stage. And every stage that people have their lawyers with them. So I think that's a very big movement. And that's something which we see it.
Okay. All right. So you may be having a lot of like misconceptions. People may be coming up to you and asking you, like, there are a lot of misconceptions about, legal professionals, and all that stuff must have happened to you. So how do you dispel those miscommunications or, misconceptions
So
about people when it comes to
I
legal
agree.
professions?
So yeah, it often happens when people say, oh, it's always good to stay away from your a government servant, a police, or a lawyer, and these notions have always been there. But somewhere I think that notion is definitely changing. Who would have thought about a media lawyer or a construction lawyer or a startup lawyer? And I think name it, there's lawyer for everything today. And everyone's dealing with some niche area. Some are doing full service practice, some have boutique practice. It's definitely evolving. And it's like I said, gone are the days where one goes to a lawyer only when one is in some distress or a problem. Even for happier things, even for great beginnings, people are reaching out to lawyers. So I think that's so entirely wrong notion.
All right. Okay. So how has technology helped you as a person and your law firm?
So making a note of meetings, even scheduling your day when it comes to your matters, your reminders, research has always been in place for a long time. Technology has been around for a long time for research methodology. So I think that's been there. But yes, I mean, with respect to litigation search, that's another tool, which is, I think, a great tool, which lawyers do use when they're doing due diligence. Uh, then there are several tools like that, which definitely helps us, even
Any
monitoring your
particular
cases.
tools? Any particular tools that you use, or any particular products?
Like I said, for research, we using usually everyone uses, like you have your SEC and a Manupatra and all of that, which has been there for years now. So I think that continues to be, I think, every lawyer's go-to thing. But apart from that, there are several other companies. Like I said, we've been taking assistance when it comes to, doing a round of litigation search, or even understanding. Practically we use technology for our day-to-day scheduling of meetings, even for matter reminders, because like we're doing pan India matters, we're doing matters even globally. So it's important, your time schedule, your time difference, your matter coming up from your lower courts to high courts to Supreme Court, tribunal practice. So then they have their vacation. So those pop-ups are really important. It's You're constantly on the go. You can tap, on a particular day, even if you're not in a city where and your matters in some other city, you can tap and see, okay, what's happening and what has happened, because automatically we maintain those data, what happened on the last occasion. So we do that manual filling of it, but we use it by way of a technology. So we've been doing that, and that's been a great help.
Right. So we have like technology growing in the market, and also we have this term known as legal technology. Like technology is new name for the legal industry. We know it as like
Correct.
legal technology. So
Correct.
what is your take on it? Like, how is this legal technology, going to help with law firms' growth? Anything in particular in mind?
I think it's really helping everybody being way more efficient. Uh, because in the long run, eventually, I mean, like I said, for matters, filing, who would have thought that, we do not have to use general paper, right? We're just going to use e-brief or things like that. So usage of now almost every other a lawyer or a counsel that you see around, everybody uses like an iPad and an Apple Pencil. It's become a mandatory thing, because you're on the go, you're making notes, you're sharing notes. You have apps like you use things like Liquid Pro. Everyone's buying these softwares because it's eventually become very, very efficient for lawyers. And I believe um, maybe it's not just being indulgent, but I think it just makes one way more efficient, at least in today's times.
All right. Now we are very well versed with this term known as AI, artificial intelligence in technology. So when as artificial intelligence is coming into the legal industry, okay. So like this is a very personal question I want to ask you, because this is something that I recently read on an article. So
Correct.
how does like AI, like come into the law sectors? What kind of laws and everything are implemented with AI, and what are the
So
benefits of
I
it?
think,
Yeah.
Mansoor, so for an overview, it's not a bad thing. You actually look up and you have like this quick answer to it, which helps. But if you're looking at a detailed reading, or if you're looking at the genuineness or the IP of that information, that's a questionable thing, which I'm not sure whether it's really foolproof or, in that sense, very updated. So to have a generic information, it's not bad. But I'm yet to see how all of this is going to pan out, to be very honest.
Because I recently had a discussion with one of my lawyer friends, okay, and she was like, AI is not over here to like harm us or anything. It's not going to become Skynet from Terminator or
I
something
don't
like
think
that.
so it's going to harm us. That's right. It's not going to harm,
Yeah.
at least us as lawyers. Um, but like I said, how updated is it? Because for us, the law is changing every minute. We have judge-made laws. We have, there are so many of these. There's bar and bench and live law. I'm sure every lawyer student, a practicing lawyer or an in-house, everybody's following on these apps. What's the recent update? What's come up? So how updated is it? I'm not sure if it's. And that's what I said. So there is a lot that can be debated on this issue, and to get an overview, it's not bad. Somebody who's just a novice, and probably in many areas where people are not sure of how this format would be, or you quickly, in seconds or barely, if you're able to give it's also about what your input is. It's very important, the kind of input that you put. If you don't put it properly, probably the result is something that you won't be happy with. So I think the keywords are very important. Sometimes you might just get a great answer out of it. So for a just a fair understanding, especially even for interns, where a lot of technology, a lot of terminology, where they're not aware of, they know how to use the technology. So maybe they can throw those keywords and have a skeleton to understand, okay, fine, this is how it is. So it's not bad in that sense. So you can supplement it with obviously a lot of things, but I don't think it's the only go-to thing. That's my take on AI.
Okay, great on. Okay, all right. So, what would be your advice to someone who's planning to start his or her own law firm? What are your pro tips?
You've decided, just take a plunge. I don't think there's no better decision than having something of your own, and if you're really sure of it. But yeah, while you do this, I believe it's important to have a partner or somebody who you can share it with, because it's, like I said, it's a curve which isn't always on a high. So you need somebody to share it with. It's very important. Somebody who understands it. And it's, if you've decided and there's no right time, if you've decided, one should just take the plunge.
Okay. And this is like another question. Okay. Like, why would you suggest, or why would you want to tell people, like, who are interested into getting into the legal industry, what are the perks that one should actually do, like get while going into the legal industry? What would be your thing that you would like to tell them?
So I think one very interesting aspect of being a lawyer is you're not just sticking about only one law. There is so much that you read, the kind of people that you meet, and your every day is interesting once you wake up every morning, because you probably could meet a businessman who's had like a very good business, then has had his share of, where things haven't been well for him. He shares your journey, his journey with you, and you there's so much insight. Then when you meet like a celebrity client, if you're doing like media practice, you meet a banker, you meet somebody from different walks of life. I think it's so interesting to even understand, and the nuances are so different, and the way people perceive business is different in different industry. The way people look at commerce is different. The creativity is different. A guy who's in a startup, so it's a great place to be. There is a lot of learning, and I don't think one can really get bored of, because there's no end to it. It's just that having that drive to learn, and if you're ready to do that, I think it's the best place to be. Because you're meeting a guy who's in hospitality, the next minute you're meeting a sportsman, you're probably meeting from different walks of life. So that's the best thing about being that kind of service provider. And you're giving the solution basis for the problem they have, right? So that's more interesting. So there's not like a particular format and where one comes to you and you're giving the same thing to everybody. So it's definitely not that.
Okay. So this would be the last question of the professional journey. And then after, Jolly will be taking over the personal journey. So the last question of the professional journey is, who is your role model in the legal industry and why?
I don't think I have any role model, to be very honest, but I've had some great mentors. While I've been in a corporate, I've started with an in-house, I've worked in a law firm, and today where I am, the place, it's primarily because of the mentors that I've had. And that goes without saying, there's a lot that I've actually picked up, and I'm sure even my partner would agree to the same. We've actually learned a lot, even a lot of things coming from the client side. Like I said, that information really drives you and nothing goes for a waste. So that's definitely the driving force. So yeah, I can't really name one role model.
So all your mentors are your role models, basically.
Practically, yes. I think, and that exposure, if you don't get that exposure, I don't think you can really shape yourself. And eventually, each one of us make our own journey, right? So you might look up to a lot of people in and what they're doing, even your contemporaries, even seniors. But yeah, I don't think I can name one person as a role model. I don't think there's anybody like that.
All right, not a problem. Okay, that was the professional journey. Those amazing answers. We are really looking forward now to hear your personal journey. So over to you, Joyce.
Thank you so much, Mansoor. So Priyanka, I would be taking up the personal questions. So let's start with the first question that if you could go back in time and give your younger self one piece of advice, what would that be?
Probably not take life seriously at all, because ultimately it just pans out. There's something that's definitely waiting for you, and there's no right time. If it happens when it has to happen. So just go with the flow.
All right. And so, what is one accomplishment that you are particularly proud of, either whether it is personally or professionally?
I think starting ANP, and that's where we are. I think that's, in fact, it's more been like a magic carpet that's given us so much more push to, achieve our other goals in life, whether personal or professional. So definitely that's been the factor.
Yes. And if I ask, what would be that one thing that people might be very much surprised if they get to know about you, what Priyanka is?
What I am, you mean?
Yeah,
Okay.
that one thing that the people don't know, but if they get to know you, that one thing, they would be very much surprised.
So it probably, if I wouldn't have been a lawyer, I would be a dancer. So maybe that's one thing.
All right,
A Kathak dancer. So yeah, I think that's been my passion. So law happened much later, but when it happened, I think there's so much, like I said, once you sink into it, there's this every day is a new day, and there's no end to learning. I think that's the best part about this field.
So are you continuing that hobby of yours, or is
Yes,
it?
I am. Yes, I am.
Oh, great. So my next question would be, as someone who works in such a demanding and high pressure field, how do you manage stress and maintain a positive outlook? Because you also have to influence your team and your firm. It's
So
not just.
that's a very interesting question, Sujali. So how I see it is, in our field, uh, it's true that you're often helping clients when they're distressed, primarily when they're distressed, and that's when they reach out to you. So your mind setup really takes a backseat. So it's not about how you're feeling at that point in time when a client calls you, let's say an hour where, and they say, we need to do some urgent movement. It could be anything, it could be just so that one says, maybe it's a corporate client but wants to move like something like an ABA, or it could be something which is a very serious concern, or some difficulty that has arisen. It's important at that point in time to let go of what's happening in your life, because the phone device that we have, which rings from, let's say, from the 8:30 in the morning till about 8:30 in the evening or night, practically it's constantly ringing. So putting yourself up with that and being available for your clients is the biggest thing, because, and I feel that's what most clients really want to, because when they reach out to, in fact, a law firm like us, they often complain that we've been to many firms, or we've been to many people where people have not been available. So I think that's something which, as a lawyer, even like in whatever number of years of practice that we've been in this firm, it's important to constantly push yourself and be available when the client really needs. And yes, floating is the only way. I don't see that there's no other way. And yeah, when it comes to, and then obviously, because ultimately the client thrives, you thrive, and that's how it is, right? So being available is really important.
Definitely. So what advice would you give to the people who want to make a positive impact in the world, either through their work or through the personal pursuits?
I think it's important for people to, one, probably be a great listener when one is in distress, and help if they have their intentions right, if they can, that is. If one can, then obviously one should try and help as much as possible, because it's like what goes out, it just comes back. It's ultimately a full circle. So yeah, it's like keep giving as much as you can. It definitely comes back some way or the other.
If you are asked to like describe yourself in one line, how would you describe Priyanka?
Multitasker. Yeah, I think that's how I see it. And probably somebody who and a problem solver. So that's how I see myself. That's the
So
first instinct as to how to solve a problem. I mean, that's I think the
yes,
go-to.
and like that is one of the most important traits of an advocate, I would say, because
Correct.
so amazing. So next question for you would be like, what do you like to do in your leisure time?
So like I said, so I've been passionate about Kathak. So that's something I've been trained as almost ever since I was like 3-4 years till about 17, and then in between, obviously, I couldn't continue, and then got back to it. So Kathak is something I really enjoy. Yoga is something I like, going for long walks. So yeah, practically, and networking. And that's something not just because of law, but yes, I think while I've come to the city, I didn't have a network. And over a period is where I've grown a network, and not just Bombay, otherwise. So that's something which pushes me. I mean, to meet different people. You never know, it's not just about work. You never know how, what comes from where, right? So yes, that's something I really enjoy.
Definitely, and networking in the profession of advocacy is something which is like crucial for every
Very
advocate.
important. Yes.
Yeah. So that is there. While talking to Mansoor, you like when he asked like, who would your role model would be, like you said like there are
Mentors, yes.
mentors practically who are your role models. But and now that you have started your own law firm and you are like functioning under it, so you are a mentor to like a lot of people right now. You have a team of yourself. So is there someone like you still follow as your mentor or like look up to in the legal industry?
Like I said, there's not one. I like being informed as to who's doing what. I think that helps you take decisions and decide for yourself. And I believe everybody has a different journey. Everybody resonates with their brand in a different way. Everybody wants their brand to be put out in a particular way. So ultimately, I mean, I wouldn't really name one mentor, but it's definitely all the mentors that I've had over a period, which includes my clients as well. A lot of times, I think they're way more informed when it comes to it's about application of law is something which we're definitely good at. But there's a lot to take even from your clients, and that's the way forward. You take it as much as you can because learning's the only way I see it.
Absolutely. And like my last question to you would be for this conversation, like was advocacy always your first choice of profession when you were deciding, and like or was it like some you have any other advocates in your family, and how
No,
is it?
I'm a first generation lawyer, and I would say law just happened. It wasn't planned. I was probably one of those very students who, after the 12th, was as disillusioned as to what to take up. Had great scores, was not sure whether I should take up one of through Stephens or LSR or go to Bombay. Or at that point in time, I wasn't sure what to take up, but law happened, and I'm glad it happened. If I have to really talk about it today, so otherwise, probably like I said, I would be a Kathak dancer.
And like you are absolutely going great, so it's we are also very glad that you took up advocacy as your profession. So that is it for today's personal
Thank
questions
you.
conversation. Over to you, Mansoor.
Okay, so Priyanka, we'll start with the rapid fire. So this is like for you to like get to know yourself a little bit better and a little bit content for our
I'm
audience.
hoping so.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So Priyanka, what is more important to you and why? Okay. What is important? Is it love or is it respect, and why?
Wow. I think respect is really important, if you ask me. And personal, professional, all of that. I don't think you can do without if one respects you. In the process, or love is something. If there's love without respect, I don't think I'll be okay with it, because there's some way that one looks at you, or the one way that one thinks about you, one way that one feels about you. So I think respect is very important in whichever equation. It could be friends, family, professional life. So that way.
All right. Jolly, your turn.
Yes. So Priyanka, if it is like to state whether Priyanka is emotionally inclined or practically inclined while taking decisions, what would it be?
Oh, emotional.
Okay. Mansoor.
Okay. Priyanka, just say that today would be the last day of your life. Okay. Today would be the last day of your life. What are the few things you would want to do in the last 24 hours of your time given to you?
Travel and just be with the people who matter to me the most. Yeah, I think that's about it.
Okay.
So, Priyanka, are you a traveler or a Netflix and chill kind of a person?
Go traveler any day.
So, with that question comes, is it mountains or beach?
I'm fine with any form of travel as long as there's travel, to be very honest.
Okay, Mansoor.
Okay. So Priyanka, this is the last question for you. Okay. So we really want to get that thinking cap back on for you. So given the opportunity, okay, that you could ask one wish for the entire universe, what would be that one wish you would want to ask for, and why?
Wow. So far, so good. I'll be very honest. I think I've been really blessed. I've got way more than I've probably imagined my life to be. And yeah, I just want to let it unfold. I don't want to really have wishes. I'm glad, because till date, it's panned out so well. So I just touch wood. It just works well. Going further, I'm good without making wishes, because I didn't make a wish to be a lawyer, and trust me, it's working well for me.
So you're just going with the flow.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Okay. So Priyanka, it was an amazing conversation with you. Thank you for giving your
Same
time.
here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
All right. So we'll see you in the next conversation, all of you. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye.